Hello, can you hear me? Hello, okay, great.
Hear you now.
Yeah, great, fantastic. Good evening, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here and honored to be here for this very long-awaited event, very exciting one too. I would like to do the introductions as quickly as possible. I think, is that what I'm going on to next? It
Yes,
was somewhere on the screen a few minutes
yes,
ago.
please go ahead. Just go ahead. Yes.
Okay, all right. Okay, so all right, though I should introduce myself last, but well, it's been put up there. I'm a graduate of fine arts. I'm a graduate of fine arts from the universities of Benin and universities of Lagos. I've been in practice in Lagos, Nigeria since 1990s. Recently, I've had exhibitions in a number of places, most recently at the about to conclude Documenta 15 in Kassel, Germany. We're not really here to talk so much about my work, but really it's about the people. We have Professor Margaret Areo. Can we put up her, can we please put up her bio? Professor Margaret Olugbemisola Areo is a professor of textile arts and art history. She got her master's in fine arts from Obafemi Awolowo University and also specialized in textile designing. She holds a PhD degree in art history from the Ladoke Akintola University of Technology, where she currently lectures. Her PhD was on 50 years of Adire in southwestern Nigeria. Professor Areo has served in many administrative capacities, such as the head of department, deputy dean of her faculty, and currently as member of the Ladoke Akintola University of Technology Governing Council. She has held many solo exhibitions and group exhibitions within and outside Nigeria. And she's a member of many professional bodies, such as the Society of Nigerian Artists and the Museum Society, to mention a few. She'll be speaking on the topic this afternoon, on her topic, which is the appraisal of the dynamics of Yoruba Asho Ofi. You're welcome, Professor. I hope she's here. You're welcome, Professor. Can we have the next bio up there so I can read it? I think that should be for Dr. Otonye Ayodele. That's correct. So it's again my pleasure to introduce to us Dr. Otonye Ayodele. She's a veteran, sculptor with an MA and PhD in art history. Her scholarship has focused on contemporary African art, particularly Nigerian arts, in its present state of practice and within the narration of African historical and artistic heritage. In the course of her research expeditions, she has delved into the trajectories of textile art practices and textile artists in Nigeria. Since 1987, when she volunteered for Better Life for Rural Women project, she has organized several textile workshops and exhibitions as community service projects where many non-artists have been introduced and trained in her textile arts. She is well exhibited and published nationally and internationally. For over 2 decades, she has mentored several artists and scholars through her art practice and pedagogy, and has been given recognition and awards. She'll be speaking on her topic in a few minutes, which is gendered practice in cloth weaving, 6 contemporary women weavers in the sustainability of Ashoke in Okeogun. You're welcome, Dr. Ayodele. Next, please. I suppose that should be Angela. Okay, Dandara, Maya Dandara. So, Dr. Dandara Maya is a PhD student at the Beirut. I always get this wrong. And you kept correcting me, even over there. Bayreuth. Am I right?
Yes, you're right.
Bayreuth.
Yeah.
Yes, Bayreuth. Yeah, International School of African Studies at the University of Bayreuth, Germany. Her research interests in African art are in African arts and textile arts, racism, material culture, and the Black diaspora. Her current research on wax prints explores the Euro-African textile as performative act that asserts and negotiates identities due to the power of its visual materiality in Brazil and Nigeria. Wow. So Dandara co-curated the exhibition, Not Yet, telling the story of textile collection of the Iwalewa House Museum of African Arts in 2021. She also is a member of the Collective for Constant Questioning, an online platform of conversations with art curators. So we welcome, she'll be speaking today on the topic, on her topic, a decolonial approach to African textiles in curatorial and collecting practices. You're welcome, Dandara. Is it just 3 of them, or we still have one more? I think there's Angela. Okay, great. So we have Angela Osuporu. Angela Osuporu is a textile and fashion designer. She has a BA in textile design and an MFA in textiles from the University of Benin, Nigeria. MA in African art history from the University of Ibadan, and MPhil from where else than the University of Ibadan. MPhil in African art history from the Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife. Her scholarship focuses on the history and development of Nigerian indigenous and modern printing textile industries. This extends to her production of print designs using indigenous motifs, signs, and symbols that explore themes such as culture, feminism, identity, and communication for use as applications on leather and other materials for decorative purposes. Her practices also include fashion making of apparel and upcycling various fibers. She has participated in some group exhibitions and workshops. She's a member of the Society of Nigerian Artists, Art Council of the African Studies Association, Lagos, and Lagos Studies Association, and Nigerian Association of Vocational Technical Educators, NAFTED. So you're welcome again, and the topic should be highlighting this hour is, sorry, you took that off, should be highlighting, the last part of the topic, which I'll also read to you. So we are welcome. We should kick off the discussion, as we had said earlier. Professor Margaret, is she here? Oh, we still have David. Oh, sorry, Professor. Sorry about that, Prof. So, Professor David Olajide Makinde had a BA in art education in textile design in 1990 and an MFA in textile design in 2006 from the University of Ife, now Obafemi Awolowo University. He obtained a Master of Arts degree, Fine Arts, specializing in African art history, and in 2014 obtained a PhD in art criticism from the University of Nigeria, Nsukka. His research focus is the use of textiles as a tool for the preservation of Yoruba indigenous culture. He has published extensively in many reputable journals at home and abroad. He has also attended and participated in many local and international conferences and workshops. He held a solo exhibition in 2017 titled Kokoro, I hope it's Kokoro and not Kokoro, or Kokoro, which was proverb-induced motifs on printed fabrics. Professor Makinde has served in many administrative and academic capacities at the university, including head of the Department of Fine Arts, Fine and Applied Arts, and Vice Dean, Faculty of Environmental Design and Management. His professional affiliations are Textile Association of Nigeria, Textile Society of Nigeria, and the Society of Nigerian Art. He's also going to be highlighting on this topic, indigenous patterned design, patterned dyed fabrics as documentation among the Yoruba of Southwest Nigeria. You are welcome, Professor Makinde. I want to thank the conveners as well for the opportunity to be here. So can we, I suppose we should kick off right away.
Are you saying?
Perfectly, yes, we can see you.
Okay, good. So hello, my name is Dandara Maya. I'm a PhD student at University of Bayreuth in Germany. I also have a scholarship from DAAD. And as the introduction you've seen before, I am studying wax prints fabrics in Nigeria, in Brazil. But today I'm going to show something a little bit different. I'm going to share with you some reflections I had during the curatorial research for the exhibition Not Yet that happened at Eva Lever House in 2021, so last year, and how this the museum practice have impacted African fashion as a whole. So this is what I'll try to demonstrate us today. So Eva Lever House is this museum African art that today belongs to University of Bayreuth and was founded in 1981 by Uli Bai, an anthropologist that you can see here. Do you see my pointer? He is sitting next to Wolfgang. So the main the collection, it's made of modern African art, and its core collection is actually the artists from No Show movement in Nigeria. But today, it's much bigger. There's much more than that. So for this exhibition, the curators were invited to work in different aspects of the collection of the Eva Lever House. And in my case, I was asked to look into the textiles and garments, because back then the direction of the museum believed that textiles were long neglected. And my presence as a researcher of I study fashion design and sort of kind of specialist in textiles right now. So they hope that it could shine some light over this collection. So I researched the museum archives to understand how the collection was constituted and how many exhibitions were made during these 40 years. So here you see, this was the first house where Eva Lever House was placed. And today we are in this bigger one, a neoclassic building that before was a bank. Yeah, so these are a little bit of pictures of the room. So each curator had a different room, and my room was called Not Yet Seen. And it's because during the research, I understood that the collection wasn't seen from many people for a longer time. Only 7 exhibitions were made, just like focused mainly on African textiles. Can you hear me and see me? I think someone has the mic open. So anyways, I've been engaging with this collection and to understand how it was constituted and how many exhibitions were made. And I figured out that only 7 were dedicated exclusive to textiles. So based on the experience at Ivaleva House, the reflection brought me to, and what I will explore today is how the curatorial practice of art institutions are reflected in their understanding of African fashion. So there is a consequences of what practice that we are doing in museums to their general understanding of African fashion. And I argued that through modernity's framework of tradition, textiles and garments from the continent are often collected as ethnographic objects in opposite to fine arts or decorative arts. So this is this division is fundamental to guide the curatorial practice of African fashion in these institutions, but also to how African fashion is perceived outside the institutions. So like tradition versus modernity and ethnographic versus fine arts. So everything starts from the acquisition of the museum. An art collection is composed from an active process of selection, possession, and disposition of interrelated objects, and this contributes to one's institution prestige. In the case of Evaleva House, this almost 700 objects that I could find in the archives span 17 different countries. So it's a very large collection for not having seen for such a long time. And diverse materials and techniques, including both textiles and garments. The cornerstone of collection was laid by Yuli Bayan, the Mr. we said before, mostly on indigo batiks and adiras, and the works of Oshogobo artists. And here in these pictures, you can see this back one is from Shangodare. Here we have Nico Kundae, and here Ademola Onikuta. And in the exhibition space, I placed them together with the anonymous artists. So adiras, batiks, and other textiles that we don't have, we don't know who made them. So the collection grew vastly over the years, owing to the directors of the museum and associated researchers. So the largest acquisition was undoubtedly the donation of 200 pieces from this Austrian collector called Bernhard Gadi and his family, who collected textiles from Africa over 30 years. So at this point, he was very old and he decided to donate these 200 pieces to, and it's far the biggest acquisition that Ivaleva House had on African textiles. So these collections is constituted of donations in individual interests of associated researchers and the directors. So what I understood that directors over the years, they were bringing textiles from different countries according to their focus point. So their own researchers, for example, would be in Côte d'Ivoire, so they would travel and bring something from Côte d'Ivoire. I did not find, it was not really clear for me, what was the intentions of bringing these textiles. So the acquisition of the textiles seems to me a bit far from taking from opportunity. Now we go in there and we bring something to represent that culture they were studying. So it's rather made under this ethnographic framework where objects that seems are representative of a given culture rather than for their own value, like their own static value in history. So there were cases, so it was not really, I could not find in the archives any relation between the acquisition and their own research. So there was no project for that. Like we're going to do research with this object and was in the context of this. There was no record of it.
Are you saying there was no intentionality behind the acquisitions?
Not as a whole. What I'm saying is like, what I'm saying, like every time I would find register of some acquisition, there was no in the archives, at least, I might be wrong, but there was not in the archives, and I could also not trace in the database the relation of the given object to a research. You know, it seems to me they were just collecting to buy the opportunity because the researcher was in the country and decided to bring something home. I might be wrong, but there was not, at least was not in the archives.
Right.
Yeah, so thinking of this, I was looking to other curatorial practice in other museums and also trying to understand how these collections are also constitutions elsewhere. So a parallel can be drawn with the Victorian Albert Museum, for example, in London, and the African collection, or rather its absence. So there was a researcher called Nicola Stellino, and she traced this acquisition of African textiles from the late 19th century until almost completely disposal of these objects in the mid-20th century. In her thesis, she examined how this archive, the V&A archives, divide very strongly ethnographic objects from fine art objects. And this division was made also not only by the V&A, but also by the British museums, because at this point, both museums, they didn't want to compete for the same objects in the market. So therefore, they create this very division that ethnographic objects should be the province of the British Museum, and therefore textile from art, sub-Saharan Africa will be considered ethnographic rather than decorative or art or fine arts. So in consequence of this, all textiles from sub-Saharan Africa were disposed by 1930 from the V&A collection, which kept only textiles from North Africa. And why they kept these textiles only from North Africa? Because North Africa was under another interesting frame, that is a racial profile of what is a racial profile that many other museums also have. So many ethnographic museums like the Met in New York, or the British Museum themselves, they divide Egyptian art, Islamic art from African art. And this is because back in the 18th century, there's this racial understanding that Egyptians were actually a branch of the Caucasian, so giving like Caucasian a race, and therefore they were in a very distant branch, somehow white. And this will be justifying why the ancient Egypt would be like such an amazing civilization, because deep down they were white. So many museums were built, ethnographic museums at the time were built under this idea. So they divide the collections from Egypt, from Africa, although it's the same continent. And under this idea, the V&A also kept these embroideries from North Africa, from Morocco, for example, because they had interested in the techniques of embroidery and was not located under this idea of ethnographic objects. So everything related to sub-Saharan Africa was understood as an ethnographic object that is, it's not really appreciated by the object itself, like its techniques or aesthetic value, but just as a representative of that given culture. So yeah, so the V&A decision to dispose these African textiles was based on this seeing the material culture of the other is inferior. And in this case, African textiles were considered ethnographic and not art. And then I see similar case in Ivaleva House when they catalog some textiles as art, and other textiles are not the same way. So for example, in 1994, Uli Bayer wrote a letter to the University of Bayreuth, which is in charge of the museum, requesting to purchase 23 adires from Nikio Kundae, Shangodare, Muraila Oyelami, and Adebisi Famundi. He listed some reasons why he wanted to purchase these textiles. And the first, for example, he said that textiles were pieces of art from great Nigerian artists. And he claimed that these textiles documented the textile arts of Africa and demonstrate the indigenous inventiveness and versatility with completely different textiles designs. He finished the letter saying that this is not I think someone has that's not mine. Okay, so he finished the letter saying that this is art, not mere handcraft. So he made like a very strict difference between the adires made by those artists, the artists who participate in the Shogmu workshops, and the other adires that he acquired himself in his during the time he lived in Nigeria. So the way that today those textiles are a catalog in the collection makes the difference. For example, those who belong to this Oshogbo artist, we know the names of the artists. We know sometimes the name of the textile, like if there was a name to it. We know the date, and we know the city where they came from. And so, for example, these two examples here, Nico Kundae, we know when she did it, what is the name, and Onshogodari, we also know something about these two pieces, but this other adire that is, we know very little. For example, we don't know who made it, we don't know when it was made it, we don't know where he bought it, because I'm 90% sure that this belonged to this first adire that he brought, but we don't know for sure. I mean, it's not really well, the information not really well put it there. So there is a very clear difference when it comes from someone that is considered an artist. It was cataloged different on the way where someone is not considered an artist, although they use the same techniques here. And so why not understand both artists like artists? And so there's a framework. It's also in the collection of Ivaleva House, like the difference between art and non-art and ethnographic textiles. So, and the whole, not only the adires, but also look into other textiles in the collection. And for the Gadi collection, the donation, for example, 200 objects, I only found the names of the person who made that textiles, a weaver or a dyer master, in 5 of them, like something about that was not too many. So so the ethnic identity, it was used as authorship instead of the names. So this difference of treatment can be explained by the position that textiles occupy in the art critics. At one hand, collectors, curators, and critics agree upon the aesthetics and qualities of these textiles. On the other hand, since these objects are also part of daily life and are subject to several manipulations for making garments or wrapping or something like that, the Western critiques fails to understand the arts and life are not apart. So they still see under this very Western framework where art should be behind some like glass. So textiles are defined as craft, which is denote absence of originality or creativity. And in addition, textile artists are framed only as transmitters of their traditional knowledge and lacking any individual agency and authorship. So it's informing the way we are cataloging the textiles inside the collections as well. So this discourse produced about the continent and informed by the structures of modernity, coloniality, that is by a matrix of power that Quijano tells. One of the categories that structure this modern thought is the binomial tradition and modern, and it comes from the evolutionist thought that implies the linearity of human development, which is always something that is behind and something that is ahead. So what is consequence to this modernity framework to museums? There are museums since a space of knowledge production, contact zones, as James Clifford say, and therefore, like, people enter these spaces expecting to receive like information, and they will not usually doubt the information or criticize the information.
Thanks so much, Dandara. Thank you so much, Dandara. It's been very, very intriguing, you know, your study and how you've gone to dissect that and look into that divide between, you know, ethnographic studies and art and the decolonization process in terms of looking at the collections at Iwalewa House. We need to take questions now quickly in the first instance. Then probably if we still have more time at the end, we'll come back and, you know, discuss deeper. So if we have questions, anyone has questions for Dandara right now, let's just have those questions. And I'm also looking in the chat. Questions, please.
Hello.
Yeah,
Hello.
please go ahead. Yes, please go ahead.
I'm Oshokbo Angela. Can you hear me?
Yes, please, Angela, ask your question,
Hey,
please.
Sandara, I just want to know if some of these your collections, if you have the datings of some of these your collections.
Sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Okay, you have collections of some Adire from Nigeria and some other places, you know, from other countries. Do you have the datings of when they were made?
Oh yeah, so this is one of the things. Some of the objects of the Iwalewa House collection is not my collection; it's the Iwalewa House collection. They have some approximate dates at least. So we know, for example, this from the 70s or the 80s or something like that. But usually we don't know the exact date when was made, only when was acquired maybe. And it's because the person who acquired didn't document it. And this is, you know, one of the things that I try to discuss here in the presentation, that if was the case of our artwork, this would be documented as an artwork. Therefore, we would know exactly all the data. But in case of these textiles, they were not documented as the same way. So, and the other thing that I also like to mention is that there is no really curatorial approach for this collection in the Iwalewa House. There's no project for it. So we was just building up over the decades, but there was never like this is a project for the textile collection. And therefore maybe for so long, I think the last exhibition about textiles was in 2001. Before, not yet. No, that though I created the room.
Yeah, if I may just quickly round up, because the time is about now, done now. You know, it's a very beautiful work, very beautiful thing you've done in coming up with this study, because it's a very important aspect in decolonization. Decolonizing even the museums. First of all, so many questions are raised there, you know, who defines what art is to, you know, the African, and then separating previous work, because colonial power continues to extend when you hold on to the same ideas of ethnographies, of separations, of classifications of race and stuff like that. That continues to perpetuate. But if you are coming in now to say, hey, look, something was not right here, and all the clues and all the pointers you've been highlighting to us show that indeed, you know, because the first thing you said was that, look, there was no correlation between the studies they were doing and the artifacts they collected, that they just happened to be objects of chance in many cases, whereas even the artists were not documented. They were taken rather as say, hey, look, this is the kind of art that this ethnic group does, or this kind of people west of the Niger, or these people deep south and north of the Nile and stuff like that. So indeed, it's very interesting, very intriguing. I hope we will still be able to come back to it. But right now, we have to move on to Professor Areo. I hope she's ready. Thank you so much, Dandara. Please just hold on, because I hope we'll come back to what you said. Thank you so much. We are very, very pleased with your study. Professor Areo, can we have you, please? Dandara, did you? Okay, Prof is back. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Prof. Okay. Does she have audio now? I hope her audio is back. Okay, can you go ahead, Prof?
Appraisal of the dynamics of Yoruba Ashofi. Welcome
Thank you.
to Telling Textile Tales live webinar. My name is Areo Margaret from Ladoke Akitola University of Technology, Ogumosho, Oyo State, Nigeria. And my topic for this presentation is appraisal of the dynamics of Yoruba Ashofi. Cloth is a vital tool in the socio-cultural life of the Yoruba of southwestern Nigeria. The Yoruba are highly fashionable and are by custom a fully clothed people. Cloth features in the performance of the multifarious aspects of the people's culture, and thus gives insight into their beliefs, values, personality, aesthetic, and socioeconomic ladder. The people are blessed with Adire, the pattern dyed cloth, Ankara, the adopted and adapted factory printed fabric, and Ashofi, the locally hand-woven traditional prestige cloth of the people, worn for special occasions. The name Ashofi, a coinage of two words, Asho, which means cloth, and Ofi, which means loom, is descriptive of the cloth and the process of its manufacture, which is weaving. Ashofi was predominantly produced by Okogu people of present Oyo State, referred to as the Araoki, people from the hinterland by Lagosians and urban dwellers. This derogatory reference to its center of production and Ashofi, the name Ashoki, that is cloth from the hinterland or rural areas by late 19th and 20th centuries. This derogatory term has become commonplace, with the original name Ashofi used in this presentation lost to many. Weaving was so popular in its saying that 50,000, that is 20%, and 60,000, that is 25%, engaged in weaving in 1953 and 1966, respectively. But Ashoki is suffering a lot of downtrend due to unwilling apprentices, influx of foreign materials, form and texture of Ashofi. But in spite of these challenges, Ashofi has become the distinctive socio-cultural identity of the Yoruba through the creative dynamism of the weavers and its contemporary usages. Ashofi involves the interlacing of two sets of yarns, the work and the weight. Technological dynamism. 4 types of looms were identified in pre-colonial Yoruba land. Ofi Oko, that is bush loom used by Abekiti weavers. Ofi Elelo, twilling loom used by Ilorin weavers. Narrow or horizontal loom in Iseyin, Oyo, Shaki, Ibadan, and Ede. Then the broad loom or the vertical loom operated by women for Kijipa and baby carrier. The last two are still in use with no significant technological changes to their forms. The materials for and construction of these existing looms are sourced and done locally. The apprenticeship pattern was generational from mothers to daughters and from fathers to sons for the horizontal and the vertical looms, respectively. The apprenticeship pattern is now for all comers and not limited to particular families as it was in the olden days. These are pictures of young people learning the trade from their father. Then on the left, you have a picture of the horizontal loom. On the right, the picture of the vertical loom operated by women. Then you have the shed of the horizontal loom with many weaving under the shirt with the yarns drawn far in front of them horizontally. And that's where the name horizontal loom came from. Materials dynamism. The yarn for weaving ashoke was sourced locally from cotton, which grew in abundance among the people, while silk was obtained from the silkworm of the anafe. The locally produced yarns have now been replaced by imported yarns, which are stronger, smoother, with longer and smoother filaments in limitless arrays of colors, in contrast to the only available traditional 3 colors. Dynamism in ashoke typology. Traditionally, there are 3 types of ashoke, which were produced with locally sourced yarns, namely etu, which was indigo dyed yarns with thin stripes or speckles in light blue running through it. Then we had a sonya woven with a beige or gray colored silk yarn obtained from cocoon of anafe infracta, anafe penata, or the anafe bolognese. Then thirdly, we have alari, the crimson dyed woven fabric with white lines running through its length. These were made into the traditional styles of the people. Here you have etu, the navy blue, indigo dyed, colored woven fabric with speckles of light blue running through it. Then you have the sonya from the silk anafe with alari at the sleeve trimming. Then you have the alari, the crimson colored fabric with white running through it. There are different types of ashoke that have been developed from these original 3 colors due to the dynamism and creative power of the weavers. An array of patterns are then developed. We have plain ashoke in different colors. And we have ashoke with lines different from what we have in the past. Then by 1970s to 1980s, we witnessed the introduction of lurex metallic thread into ashoke, which was nicknamed Mirror in the Sun after a television drama series at that time. And then we have ashoke with predominant lurex yarns, which are shiny all through. Then we have ashoke with supplementary webbed surface designs. Also, these webbed designs were done with the webbed patterns so that the patterns are drawn in different forms, and in some cases, alphabets are even written over the surface of the fabric. Then we have the ashoke, the eleya or oniho, with holes, one as headgear in the picture here. Then we have the ashoke with holes and floating supplementary yarns running over the surface. These are examples of this in this picture. Then as there was changes in fashion or fashion trend globally, the ashoke weavers also adapted their patterns to these changes found in the society. And when the ball-bearing pattern came into fashion, that was found all over in bags, scarves, blouses, English wears, the ashoke weavers also adapted this pattern into their weaving, just to move with the trend as of that time. Ashoke at the stage also was decorated with machine surface embroidery, just to embellish it. So all along, there are different ways of creating patterns of ashoke, not in the old traditional way alone. Then at the same, you have ashoke with applique surface embellishments, either with sequins, beads, or fabric on fabric to create pattern on the surface. Then at the time in the history of ashoke in Nigeria, among the Yoruba weavers at the state engaged services of Ghanaian kente weavers. And this resulted in what was known as kenteoke, a coinage from kente and ashoke. Then with the introduction of computer into the environment, the designers, the weavers, also adapted their patterns to make their patterns look like something generated from the computer. And these are 3 examples of such patterns from this era. Then we have surface printing on ashoke. Printing was done on ashoke using printing ink to create patterns on the fabric. Then we have ikat ashoke, in which the yarns were already dyed, tie-dyed before weaving to create pattern in the lines. Then we also have hand-cut ashoke, in which hot soldering iron was employed in cutting holes into the ashoke to create a lacy pattern. Then also we have factory printed imitation Ashofi coming into being for something that is lighter for the young and the educated folks to use as wares. Later, we had Ashoki decorated all over with Swarovski crystal to create patterns on the plain fabric. Ashofi is now eclectic as it is used in conjunction with any other textile materials that is in fashion. Ashofi is now sewn into trendy modern styles in fashion, a deviation from the traditional styles of old, thus making it an all-time relevant prestige cloth. Also, fashion accessories such as shoes, bags, hand fans, and so on are made out of Ashofi. Although the technology of the looms of Yoruba Ashofi has not changed significantly, Ashofi as a prestige cloth still remains a dynamic, indispensable feature of all Yoruba ceremonies and rites of passage. This is possible because of the creative dynamism of the weavers. In addition to this, is the ability of the designers to adapt Ashofi to trendy, fashionable ways. Thank you.
Stop sharing. Go.
Thanks so much, Prof. This was sharp, fast, very informative, very enlightening. You said so many things here that I learned, and I know we are going to come to questions in a minute. You talked about Etsu, Alari, Sanyo. These are some terms we don't even know anymore. Then the fact that there is the horizontal loom and the vertical loom, one for women and one for men. You know, these are really very intriguing aspects of the production of Ashoke. I wanted to also highlight the fact that you mentioned that there's been a lot of devaluation of Ashoke through derogatory names like the OK, because in the earlier seminars, you know, the speaker we had there, Deola Sego, she had said that OK, her own interpretation of the OK that she gave us was that it's the top cloth, that's the high culture, the top type of cloth you want to wear. And I now see how it was devalued, that name was devalued by the society by saying, well, it's for Araoke, that is, it's for those rural people, it's not for us. And those are very, very interesting insights that you gave us. So thank you very much, Prof. I would like us to take questions. If we have questions for Prof, let's take them now. Questions, please. Or while we are waiting for those, I still want to also say that it's very interesting that, you know, you spoke about the dynamics of Ashoke, how it has, and you know, that's basically the development, how it's been developing, how it hasn't been put down. It continues to evolve. And we saw that a lot in Deola Sego's work, where she had taken the production, you know, the creation of Ashoke to a whole new level, you know, and this is most exciting when we it's most interesting when we combine your deep insights, especially where we are coming from, and to know that there is so much more that hasn't been done, that can still be done in making Ashoke to go even higher. Let me put it that way. Okay, so reactions, please, and before we go to the next speaker, questions?
Yeah, I think there's one in the chat, but I think it's been answered about the difference between Ashoke and Ashofi.
Yes, she answered that. I said that in the chat. But do you want to talk on that again, Prof, just in a minute before we go to the next speaker, and then we close?
No, I think it's very clear. She's explained that. That's
Okay. Yes, she explained it very clearly. Okay, so yes, Araoke. I mean, that was that was. These are so new, you know, and it's good to be reminded, you know, you know. So, thank you once again, Professor. God bless you. Can we go to the next?
So good next presentation. Okay. Then.
I'm Otoye Ayodele, and I want to present my paper. I'm presenting my paper titled Gender Practice in Cloth Weaving, 6 Contemporary Women Weavers in the Sustainability of Ashoke in Okeogun. The role and function of cloth in any society are both generic and specific. The utility of cloth is relevant in the day-to-day needs of people and may distinguish individuals and groups specifically in social class, gender, occupation, and status within a particular cultural group and geographical area. Cloths are pliable and can be emblematic, which means that patterns may communicate information on identity, beliefs, and values. Now, first, cloth is synonymous with textile. So when we're talking about cloth weaving, we are also talking about various types of textiles that exist, both in their creative processes and functions. Traditional handcrafted textiles have long-standing tradition and are deeply rooted in the African culture. Hence, cloth is one of the components of Africa's material culture. In this paper, I'm actually focusing on Ashoke cloth, particularly, and then the weaving practice in Okeogun. Okeogun is northern Yoruba land and is in Nigeria. Now, the towns that this paper is looking at, the towns where the research has been located are Kisi, Eruwa, Shaki, Isheyin, Igbofe, and Okeo. Actually, Okeogun is reputed for producing Ashoke. That is why the name Ashoke itself has been taken off from the word Oke, Asho Oke, meaning the cloth from Oke, which is the cloth from Okeogun. Now, Yoruba with cloth weaving. Weaving is believed to have developed from as early as 6000 BC, when early Neolithic people began to settle in permanent dwellings, farming, and domesticating animals. So weaving is usually performed on a loom, or a device that holds a warp thread in place while a weft thread is woven through it. Warp is the lengthwise or longitudinal thread in a row, while the weft, sometimes called woof, is the term for the thread or yarn which is drawn through the warp yarns and passed over and under the warp on a loom. Now, in this picture, you see a man that is working on a loom, on a particular type of loom. There are different types of looms. But here, in typical Yoruba cloth weaving method, the man is weaving a cloth, and the cloth, the Ashoke cloth, is woven in different ways or patterns or styles for different functions or with different utilities. We have, for example, the kilipa, the kichipa, the iyegbe, the oja, and we have other woven cloths that are sonyo, etu, and alari. These are all different Yoruba woven cloths. The origin of gendered cloth weaving practice can be traceable to the types of looms used. Very early, Siba identified 2 types of distinguishable looms which exist in West Africa for the sexes. You have the wide vertical loom for women and the double-headed narrow band horizontal loom used by men. Now, gendered practice in cloth weaving. From the previous statement I had made, you can see that there is already a selective gendered practice women are expected to use particular types of looms for whatever reason and produce certain types of cloth for use, especially in Yoruba land and particularly in Okyogo, where most of these cloths are made. When we look at the word gender, that's simply an identity for the sexes, and has been in discussion even since the 1950s when it was initiated by John Money. All kinds of references have been made, to discuss different gender roles in society. But presently, when we look at the word gender, it focuses more on feminine or feminist identities and concerns. In this paper, I'm looking at women who have in their own different practices have stood out in Okyogo, either for the impact they have made or for the kind of practices they have carried out. And there's so many of the women in the research, so many of the women were identified, but I'm only looking at 6 women in this paper because of brevity. Now, 6 contemporary women Ashoke weavers in Okyogo. The first woman whose photograph is seen here is Mrs. Felicia Folabi, who wanted to be a goldsmith but eventually became a cloth weaver after she was persuaded by her mentor. She has performed very well, and she's young, born 1974, but made so much impact. The dexterity of Felicia in cloth weaving has impacted and influenced many female weavers in her community. The next women, 2 women are shown here in the pictures. I have Mrs. Modinot Jamiu, who was born in 1968, and also Mrs. Elizabeth Adegbero. The fascinating thing about these 2 women is that they ventured into the male territory of using the horizontal narrow band loom, which is their specialty. Even though they also work in the with the vertical loom, but they have proved that they can also venture into using the other type of loom. The next set of women are Mrs. Charlotte Gumbi, who said her father motivated her to venture into using the horizontal narrow band loom, and she has been practicing cloth weaving since 2014 after she left it for a while. The next person, Mrs. Adijat Abdul Rashid, born in 1976, has also been practicing weaving since 1994 and has made a lot of impact in her own area in Shaki. Then finally, Mrs. Shadiat Yisa, working on the vertical loom for women, had made a lot of impact. Actually, Mrs. Shadiat originally came from Kogi State, and on arriving in Kisi, she saw that there was no practice of cloth weaving, and she decided to set up her enterprise there. She had made so much impact in the area since then, having trained so many young ladies in the area of cloth weaving. In conclusion, the enterprise and efforts of these women weavers have impacted the cloth weaving practice in Okyogo. The few points that can be drawn from the research are: first, cloth weaving is sustainable. Women can weave on any type of loom. Apprenticeship is important and necessary. Minimal education is required to learn cloth weaving. Cloth weaving can be a full-time vocation. Marital status of a woman is not a barrier to the practice of cloth weaving. The practice can be made trendy to sustain patronage. All religions permit the practice of cloth weaving. The persistence of the women to venture to sustain this cloth weaving practice can be supported by funding from government and other organizations. Actually, the women have risen up to the challenge because many men who were weaving had left, migrated, gone to other skilled works, gone to white-collar jobs and Western education, and have abandoned most of these areas of cloth weaving. In fact, some sheds have totally been abandoned and collapsed. And lineages that were previously working on cloth weaving today have very few people signing up to learn the cloth weaving. So I just want to conclude by saying that these women are making a lot of efforts. And from the picture here in the conclusive page, you can see that they are recruiting many young ladies into cloth weaving to be able to sustain the practice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Thank you so much. This was so insightful because it's a focused, it's a localized study. And I'm sure a lot of us have learned the deeper aspects of what is actually on the ground, what is going on. It'd be interesting to also do comparisons, see what Dandara was talking about when a lot of the artists whose textiles were in Iwalewa House were not identified because of the ethnographic practices there. It would be interesting to know if, even though the women are taking over most of the trade now, they are operating both looms, male and female, and they are doing every type, irrespective. There is no barrier in religion or anything. It would be interesting to know if they are, if what they are producing is classified as art or craft, and if if they sign off their work through any marks. That would be interesting. But please, let's have questions quickly in a minute or two before we go to the next speaker. Take our questions, please.
Well, I think I just make a comment and to commend the last presenter. Very important work, very fresh study. And there's always a lot of emphasis on the fabrics and not the makers of the fabric. And I think this is really very important that we look at the manufacturers of these incredibly beautiful materials that are hand woven in Okeogo. And also to refer to Dandara, I know the collection in Iwalewa House. Yes, a lot of them have not been properly documented. Because when I was going through the textiles, it was very difficult to say when this coming, what came in, and at what time, what year, where was it collected from. But it's also interesting to mention that there were a few that even had the names of the weavers. For example, there was a woman from Obuluku, whose name was written on the fabric. So, because usually when you acquire this kind of fabrics, you establish a connection with the weaver, and I think that was the case with this work that was brought in, this fabric that was brought in. And so so if you look closely, you will find, I think her name was Okodule from Buluku, and it's quite interesting to see that. So Otonye's paper is really very, very important work, and thank you for this.
Thank you very much once again. Do we have the next that's Professor.
Bring the next person in. Can you mute? Somebody's yelling there. So I'm trying to
okay.
Get
the next speaker, please.
Yes, I'm trying to get it in.
Okay, thank you. I did see some questions in the chat, and I hope at the end we'll be able to come back for the speakers to talk on one or two of them before we conclude. I hope we'll have time for that. Sorry?
Department of Fine and Applied Arts,
Okay.
University in You are welcome to this webinar titled Telling Textile Tales. The theme of my presentation is Indigenous Pattern Dyed Fabrics as Documentation among the Yoruba of Southwest Nigeria. Introduction. Dyeing activities have been an age-long tradition among the people of Africa, particularly among the Yoruba women of Southwest Nigeria. Prior to the coming of European position of Africa, women have engaged in dyeing activities where they use indigenous technology and locally sourced materials. Existing literature has not established the actual date for the commencement of pattern dyed production among the Yoruba of Southwest. However, accounts of early missionaries, explorers, and trade merchants provided an evidence of the existence of pattern dyed fabrics among Yoruba women of Southwest Nigeria. In support of this, Yoruba proverb that says, that is, when you show interest for the indigent or lazy ones, it is required that you dye the fabric. In essence, if we interpret this proverb, we see that if dyeing has not been part of the indigenous culture among the Yoruba, this proverb will not exist. Dyeing started as a family trade among women in Southwest Nigeria, where women passed down the technology to their daughter. It was an inheritance that belongs to a family. We have dyer's family. By 1930, there was a ton of events. New materials were introduced. Men also joined the trade. We have new techniques introduced. And we have a lot of foreign influences coming into play in the production of adire fabrics. What is adire? Adire is a word for tie-dyed fabrics coined from two verbs, adi and re. Adi means to tie, while re means to soak, bury, or immerse in solution. Adire has two values, intrinsic and extrinsic. The extrinsic values has to do with the surface appearance, that is color, motif, texture, and pattern. While intrinsic is hidden, and this is what the theme of this presentation is concerned about. Types of adire or pattern dyed fabrics. We have four types of adire or pattern dyed fabrics. Oniko, that is the adire produced with the use of raffia, thread, and string. We also have alabere. Alabere is where we use needle to resist, needle and thread to resist the fabric to create patterns. Eleso is where we top in pebbles, tie it before it is dyed in the solution. The fourth one, which is about the modern type of adire, is eleko. Eleko uses cassava paste to resist dye so that design can be created. What are the materials and tools for dyeing? The first and the most needed material is the indigofera plant, because that is the source of the dye. The Yoruba people call it elu. Elu can be sourced from the farm or readily bought from the market. We also have the mordant, which is also processed from cocoa pod by burning into ashes and collected. Earthenware pots, tearing stick, strings, cassava potato, paste, alum, each sauce, among others, are required for the production of adire. Production of adire cloths. Production starts from sourcing for motifs, which are gathered from nature, objects, words, phrases, proverbs, and myths. Also from cutting of indigofera plants. The plant is processed by pounding, rolled into balls, and allowed to ferment over time. During dyeing, cocoa pod ashes is added to fix the dye on the fabric, and the dye is allowed to mature before the actual dyeing commences. How do you process motifs? Motifs are not used as silk. They are processed by using stylization, profiling, abstraction, and silhouetting. If you look at the picture here, you see a lot of these activities there. You see hippopotamus, cow, ram, flower, and figures. Birds are also in their profiles. Meanings in Adire motifs. The documentation in Adire fabric is actually in the meaning of the motifs. Every motif in Adire design has its own meaning. For instance, where crabs are used as motif, it is to suggest good fortune. Where fruits are used, they suggest prosperity, increase. Where palm are used, it suggests dignity. If you look at the picture there, it shows a stylized palm. Atelewo. This is found in a common saying among the Yoruba people that Atelewo and Itanije. This is dignity of labor. Interlocking. When poems are interlocked and used as motif, it shows friendship. Talking drum is expectation of good message. God rattle is also of good message. Yoruba people will say, "You'll also be is happiness," suggests happiness. Earring used by women also suggests good news. Pigment suggests sincerity, humility, and friendliness. Here at Yoruba also have a proverb that says, wavy lines among others. How does Adire document is used as documentation among the Yoruba people of Southwest Nigeria? The motifs in Adire actually suggest the meaning, and it actually read out the messages that the dyers want to send out. The documentation in Adire is actually in the motif. If you look at the first motif here, which combines letters with images, it is titled Ibadadun. Ibadadun was produced as a coronation fabric. Ibadadun, Ibadan Street, which shows a good governance and a happy environment at that time. This suggests that the fabric was produced to grace an occasion. That's the coronation. We also have an historical fabric produced in form of Adire leather. In this fabric, you can see the European, that is the King George and the Queen at the center of the fabric. And you can see the horse and other abstract designs. The cloth was produced to honor King George or to document King George's visit to Nigeria during independence. The third one is a fabric produced to gratify God after a successful exploit. It is titled Ongogo Oserioluwa. That is, everything is known by God. Whatever your achievements, God knows about it. That is, nothing happens to man without the knowledge of God. What are the developments in Adire production? A lot of development has happened since the independence. New colors were introduced, color dyes in yellow and varieties. Adire was no longer used, or was not just used for dress alone. Fashion has taken over most of their uses. It is now used as bags, it is used as holder, it is used as bed. If you look at the picture below there, you can see how people have used Adire in recent times. Adire has gone to international markets. It is now an object of export to different parts of the globe. Workshops and galleries sprang up, championed by Nike Art Gallery in Osogbo. You also have the National Museum, where young graduates are being trained to take over the trade. Adire also has been introduced as a trade subject, dyeing and bleaching in WAEC that students in secondary school now do. So new motifs are also introduced, where man-made objects are featured. Automobiles, we also have automobiles, telephones, and other objects. Like that. Recommendation. The name Adire is obsolete and it is no longer adequate to describe all pattern dyed fabric produced by dyers in Southwest Nigeria. Why? Because the term Adire by its meaning did not cover cassava starch paste, that is Adire leko. Hence, it should be called solaro or ashoalaro, which interprets to pattern dyed fabric. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor. This is one that is so enlightening, so exciting. Even seeing the different new colors for Adire, very, very. We really appreciate your beautiful presentation, sir. So, can we have the questions in a minute?
To present to the moderator, Tayo, are you still in the house? Thank you very much, Professor Makinde.
Okay, do we have questions, please?
Tayo is lost connection. Do we have questions for Professor Makinde? That was a beautiful presentation. Do you have questions in the chat?
Let's go on.
Yes, I think there's one question, and I think it could be Professor Areo or Professor Makinde from Dandara, who's asking, could you tell us more about how this gender division of homes started? Can you answer that?
Okay. You want me to answer that now? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
I can hear you. I don't know if I'm back too, if you can hear me, but please do. Go ahead.
I'm hearing, I can hear you. Okay, to answer that question, it's not really about when specifically the it started. There's no fixed time or date that the looms were separated. Though the earliest looms in Africa can be traced back to the Egyptian looms that were used by the male. And then much later in East Africa, in the Northern Africa, because of most of them were Muslims, the men wove very large cloth. I think that must have been the reason why the men had the horizontal looms so they could make large pieces. But I think it is more of the issue of separating roles, domestic roles in society. The vertical looms made smaller strips, and maybe, you know, the fact that they were made for maybe more domestic use, while the larger strips were exported or taken across the Mediterranean for sales. But I think my focus on this work is not really about the weaving techniques or styles, it's more about the issue of roles now. And I think the issue of having looms separated must have come up just like the kind of roles, you know, that you find in the North, where men weave and women dye, you know, that kind of thing. Or like you have in the domestic, in the house, where maybe women are asked to cook while the men do some other harder chores. So I think that is what must have led to these looms being separated originally. the horizontal looms are actually used to produce wider cloth. So that's just what I can say about that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Dr. Otoye, we are losing you. I think your network is very poor.
One about
I think our internet is,
Yeah.
she has very poor connection. So in addition to what she said, I also think that, yes, when she talked about the roles, that males and women, the differentiation of roles between males and females, I also think that because women were also working in the homestead, it's very likely that the horizontal, the loom that were used by men had covered more surface area, covered more space, because they usually will work within, in a small courtyard or around the kitchen. So they wouldn't have that opportunity to spread out a long loom. So the vertical one was much easier for them to manage. You take it out of your room and put it outside on the corridor and do your weaving. But the men will spread out. So if you see the weavers in the saying, they have so much space to spread out their looms. I think that is one of the reasons that perhaps one of the reasons that made it more popular amongst the women folk to use the looms that are associated with them. So it doesn't really say that they can't do what the men do, but the fact that it was very convenient for them to do that. Because you find that in most traditional societies, women were not even involved in blacksmithing, because you have to go to a forge, and that forge is likely to be outside of home. But they always did things that they could handle so that they could keep an eye on the family. So the biological roles played a vital role in defining what they were expected to do and what they were allowed to do. Okay, so we're going to go on to Angela, who's the next presenter, and I think we have a recording for her. So pardon me, I'm a bit slow with technology. I think it has to do with age. So so find it out and then we'll share her presentation. Thank you.
I want to talk about Prince Angela Ifoma, a lecturer in University of Lagos, Akoka. I can't hear it. I'm also a designer and an artist. I want to talk about Angela Ifoma, a lecturer in University of Lagos, Akoka. I'm also a designer and an artist. I want to talk about Prince fabric, which you all know. It's an interesting way of embellishing fabric that I know you're going to enjoy. The topic is on print fabric design and production history in Nigerian textile industry. Fabric is a permeable and a flexible material that is made from silk, cotton, wool, and other fibers. Its production technique involves weaving, braiding, crochet.
Hello?
There are various ways of which fabrics can be embellished, and this includes the above mentioned techniques, as well as printing processing, which is one of the interesting ways of embellishing fabric. Printing, as we all know, is a process whereby certain area of a fabric is resisted by stamping or printing a resist agent on the fabric before it is dyed or printed using a pigment. There are various types of print fabric, and the production history in Nigeria differs. We have two major types of print fabric, and indigenous print fabric and the modern print fabric. Under the indigenous print fabric, we have Adire Leko. Adire Leko is a type of print fabric
and it is the first print fabric that is produced in the South and West,
whereby certain areas on a fabric resisted using a resist agent such as starch, which can be lapu, that is corn, or cassava starch. It started in 1910
Let me ask question.
in Oshogo, in Abeokuta, and it is the first print fabric that is produced in southwestern Nigeria. However, over time, it has evolved both in material and in technique. Batik print fabric. Batik print is also an indigenously produced print fabric that is produced just like that of the Adire Leko by using a resist agent to resist certain areas on the fabric with wax before it is either dyed or painted on. It started in Oshogo in the 1950s under Zawenda, Olivier, and Jody Beer at the Umbayo workshop at Oshogo. Presently, its development has included various techniques and materials. Ankara batik. Ankara batik is also a type of batik, or rather a type of print fabric that is produced using both Ankara and batik to produce a further type of print fabric that neither looks like an Ankara or a batik. And this makes its print very unique. It started during the scarcity of cotton fabric in Nigeria. That is when there was no cotton fabric. The production of cotton fabric in Nigeria was scarce, and imported cotton, such as the Guinea brocade, were too expensive for the indigenous producers to work with. And in order to keep them in production, they had to buy cheaply produced and imported print fabric to produce indigenous print fabric so as to keep them in market. Others include the indigenous prints with plastiso ink. This is a type of a unique print fabric that is done on mostly tie-dye backgrounds, or a type of modern print fabric that is being made on, it's a type of print that is being made on modern print fabric. This is a process whereby the indigenous fabric wants to imitate the type of modern print fabric. They now have to print this plastiso ink on a modern print fabric just to make it look like that of a modern print fabric. It is done, or rather produced, using the PVC particles. We also have the Kampala, which is a type of print that is cheaply produced by these indigenous producers. It started in the late 1960s by local textile industry as well as individuals who were ignorant of the print fabric production processes. Also interesting and
Scott.
next is the modern print fabric industry. The first textile print mill that was established in Nigeria was in Kano. It was in 1950, while the second was outside of Lagos in 1952. There were over 200 textile industries in Nigeria. But presently, there are just two industries, textile industry that are into the production of print fabric. And these are the some plant Nigeria Limited and the new Textiles Nigeria Limited. These are examples, or rather, these are the pictures of the two textile industries that are still into the production of print fabrics in Nigeria. This is the Sun Flag Nigeria Limited, which is at Elmore Road in Lagos, while this other one is New Textiles Limited. You can see an overview of it. It's at Ikorodu, also in Lagos. There are various types of modern print fabrics, and this includes Kampala. I know I've earlier mentioned Kampala as indigenously produced, yet there are also the simulated type of Kampala that are being produced using machines, most especially the high velocity printing machine to produce them. It was introduced in the late 60s to 80s from Europe, Asia, as well as the local textile mills. The gum print type
Guys, give me your earphones.
the gum print type of print fabric it's just like that of the wax print. But instead of the wax, gum are being used to produce this print fabric. This was introduced due to the high cost of wax as well as the unavailability of wax at a certain time in Nigeria. However, the use of gum is being used in production due to just like I earlier said, due to the high cost of wax, which up to now is also at the high rates when it comes to production. Polyester Ankara. Polyester Ankara is a type of print that is produced with the use of polyester fabric and a high velocity machine. In the production of polyester Ankara, 100% cotton are not being used, and also wax are not also being used. It is produced cheaply, and that is why it is also very affordable by everyone to get. These are examples of the print fabrics. This is Adre Leko being painted with hands, and this is an end use of it. By the time it is being immersed in indigo dye, this is the result of the work. This is batik print. This is an example of a batik print. Why this is an example of Ankara batik. This is Ankara. This other one, this figure 6B, is the Ankara batik. You can see there's a slight change in this design. Batik have been used to work on it, and that is why it's not giving you exactly what the Ankara is. This is also an example of Ankara batik. You can see that they're all having interesting look. This is a print with plastisol ink. This is the plastisol ink. Like I earlier said, it is usually made or printed on fabrics, on tie and dye background. This is an example of it. Why this is also an example of plastisol ink when being used to imitate a modern print fabric. These are Kampalas. Why this is a modern print fabric? That is polyester Ankara. This is an example of polyester Ankara. Conclusion. The Nigerian modern textile industry have transformed the way they operate due to main crises which have affected the industry and their mode of production, distribution, and sales. and these changes include: one, changing from trade market to customized market. Secondly, the non-use of wax or resin in the textile industry and the use of Arabic gum in another. Thirdly, the use of polyester Ankara instead of a 100% cotton fabric is being used presently in the production of fence fabric. The fourth one is the use of high velocity machine in printing. And the next is the buying of fabric in yards, 1 yard, 2 yards, 3 yards, which is not usually the case when it was wax free. However, in southwestern Nigeria, few Yoruba cities now practice the indigenous print fabric. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angela, for the beautiful presentation. I think, we've been very, very enlightened indeed. I think there was a question, and there may be some other questions. I don't know, can you all hear me? I think there's a question that was being referred to you in the chat about slide 2, about the second slide, and they wanted to clarify. I think this is being asked by Ayodeji Oluwaseun. He wants to know if there's a typo error in the second slide, where you made us understand that Adire started in 1910 at Oshogbo in Abeokuta. He just wants that clarification. I'm sure by now you already see the error there. Hello, Angela, did you get that?
Let's unmute her. Angela, unmute yourself. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can now hear you.
We can hear you.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much. Actually, there have been datings there have not been datings when it comes to Adire. The books I've read, explain that over the years, Adire started a very long time ago. And
I think he was referring to
time. Hello.
Sorry, I think he was referring to Oshogbo in Abeokuta. I think that's what it was. If you look at the second slide, is that what it says?
Oshogbo in Abeokuta. Yes, Adire Eleko precisely started in Oshogbo in Abeokuta.
Okay.
I'm talking about Adire Eleko.
Okay.
It's a kind of print fabric. I'm not talking about tie-dyes another time. I'm specifically talking about Adire Eleko. So according to the materials I read, it was specifically stated that it started 1910 in Oshogbo in Abeokuta.
Okay, because Professor, he let us know there were 4 types of Adire. Then the last one he told us, which was the most modern, Eleko.
Yes.
And that's the one you spoke about just now.
Yes. Okay.
Perhaps you should ask Professor Areo and Professor Makinde to add
to help
points here. Yeah, because usually I know what she's talking about. Usually they associate 1910 to the out of Adire Eleko, but it could be earlier, and I think it's earlier because even the fabrics came in around the end of the 19th century. So maybe Professor Areo can help out here.
Well, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Can hear you, Prof.
I think there is a mix-up. Oshogbo is in Osun State, Abeokuta is in Ogun State. They are 2 different places. Both of them are Adire centers, but they are 2 different places. Then apart from that, the Adire Eleko started much earlier actually in Ibadan. And it was later introduced to the Abeokuta people after the internecine war, and some of them migrated to Abeokuta.
and started in Abeokuta. And later on, when the men realized that the women were making so much money from Adireleko, and they thought the production was too tedious, started cutting patterns from flat tins of imported chests and boxes to make stencils. And that's when we started having the Adire Batani, which is still Eleko. They forced the starch paste through the holes in the stencil onto the fabric. So Oshogbo generally has never been a popular place for Adire Eleko. It has been more of an indigo dyeing center. And that's why they will say Arom Beloshobo. Oshogbo is known for indigo production. Even the history of the town is woven around that indigo, Oshoigbo, where the town was formed, when the town was established, how the town came about, everything is woven around the indigo dye. And at a stage in history, people from Ibadan, Abeokuta were going to Oshogbo to buy indigo balls. We're going to Oshogbo to buy indigo balls. So Adire Eleko, when you talk about Oshogbo, it's more of dyeing, stitching, pleating, especially Adire Alakete and the likes. But with Susan Wenja and Libaya in Oshogbo, then the Adire wax can be really traced to Oshogbo. That has the genesis in Oshogbo particularly. So each of these centers have their own peculiarity. So batik is peculiar to Oshogbo. When you talk of origin, Adire Eleko to Ibadan, Adire Batani to Abeokuta, and other types of Adire to Abeokuta. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ma.
Thank you, Prof. That's so enlightening, so revealing. Thank you. So, are there any more questions, please, that we want to take now? Or comments, please?
Hello.
Yes, hello, Angela.
Somebody asked a question and was asking the difference between plastisol and opaque ink. They're actually the same thing. They're same. Either call it plastisol or call it opaque ink.
Okay, I think you should round up this session so we can go to the last panel for today. This has been very exciting. So Tayo, I think she closed the session.
Yes, it's been such an honor to chair this session, and I want to thank all the speakers, erudite professors, panelists. I want to thank everyone who has attended and contributed in one way or the other. It's been most enlightening, and I hope that very soon, as we continue the other sessions, we'll have a more engaging forum. Thank you very much, and good evening.
I was going to make some comments, just an update on Professor Bakinde's paper, for example. He mentioned issues about, I talked about training. Sometimes we keep we kind of confine some of the training centers to Nike Okundai, who's doing tremendous work, and maybe some other place. But I want us to recognize the impact that younger graduates who are not employed are doing in terms of setting up Instagram centers. They're having centers online where they do training. It's incredible the number of people that are being trained online through those platforms, and also through the artist cooperatives in places like Aguda, Itire, Akerele. The number of students that come from all over Nigeria to train there is incredible. They do internship. It's massive, not just art students, students of different professions. So we must include that, because these are things that are happening. Then when you talk about dyeing Ankara, it's gone beyond just dyeing Ankara, because most of the Ankara fabrics are even polyester based. They can't dye them. So they're even dyeing these multicolored bed sheets you find, which are sold along the streets, with some of these very Western motifs, like, I don't know, this teddy bears and all of that you find. So what they do is that they strip those colors off the cloth by using soda, and then they dye. They also buy dead stock from factories. So you buy 5 years and you see that they're in pieces, So it's not just about Ankara now. There's so many fabrics are using, because there's a dearth of fabrics in the market. and we must also put that into our own work, just an addition to update your work. But these were brilliant papers. Thank you so much.